just to count, and it's.
Yes, you can. You can just start. You can start.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My respects to you. I'm Ananda Vrindavan Dasi, and tonight I'm going to host this conversation instead of Ananta Vijay or Andrei Peshets. He's not feeling so well today, so I hope you're going to have a wonderful evening. I would like to welcome you to this evening conversation with a very special guest, that is Mr. Martin Hausner, yes, also known as Mahatma Das, and he's a very, very well known amongst Bhakti yogis for his very unique and specific approach to spirituality. He's actually, his motto, his mission statement is helping others to help themselves, or helping others to succeed. So today we are going to speak with Mahatma Das about different topics and ask him different questions. But I would like just to little introduce him. He's a Mahatma Das. He's a coach. He's a mentor. He's a writer, teacher, lecturer. He's also lectured at some very important places such as Google, Intel, Cisco, and etc. What we like especially about Mahatma Das is his ability to approach spirituality from really like practical angle, and to offer spiritual solutions for problems that are really like relevant for a modern person. Okay, just a second. Another thing, very remarkable thing, is that Mahatma Das, he spent over 50 years practicing Bhakti Yoga, developing his skills, his insights, his different spiritual technologies, which he then was sharing and is sharing with his audience, and sharing his very, very mature experiences with his audience. So the topics that he's choosing to focus on are very relevant for his audience, and these are topics such as relationships, marriage, forgiveness, then leadership, self-control, self-mastery, self-discipline, spiritual mentorship, self-esteem, very, very interesting.
Meditation,
yes, of course. I will mention a little bit about that, how that influenced me in 2014. Thank you so much, Mahatma Prabhu, Mahatma Das, for joining us tonight. It's honor and pleasure to have you, and please feel comfortable in this conversation among us. And I forgot also to mention that Mahatma Prabhu, he's a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, and he was serving for a long time in ashram, mentoring and training monks, and also distributing spiritual literature. He's well known also for his very, great sense of humor, for his music, enchanting music, for his workshops, seminars, books, and for creating, especially for creating support for people on spiritual path or for on spiritual quest. So many people benefited from your work, Prabhu, and me, myself personally, I feel really grateful, because I remember in 2014, I discovered your seminar, your retreat on japa meditation or mantra meditation. And at that time, I was really struggling with my personal meditation. And then I came upon this retreat, and it was really a game changer for me. And thank you so much for that help. It was really and what I liked was your very down-to-earth approach, very,
practical.
like human, practical human approach, and very
Real.
sensitive also.
Real,
yes,
yeah.
Exactly. Too. So I wanted, as a first question, an introductory question, I wanted to ask you, what was your path, what your path looked like, and how it began, and how your teacher, Bhaktivedanta Swami, influenced you, in which way, and in which major way he influenced your path and your life. Thank you once again for joining us.
You're welcome. Nice to be here. So it's not going to be translated and
it's simultaneous translation, so it goes on another profile, Facebook profile.
Okay. So I should speak slowly.
Luca is really good in translating it simultaneously quickly.
I'll pause a little bit. You could say I had an inquisitive mind, not so much inquisitive about science, how things work, but more inquisitive about why anything should exist and what is the ultimate purpose of it. So for me, and I think for many spiritual seekers, the first question is, why am I here before what do I want to do? All right, let's say I was a musician or a writer, or let's say, whatever I was. That's what I was. I was a musician and student. And okay, so that's what to do, but I didn't know why to do it. And so because I didn't know why, it was hard to do the what without the why. There's no, why is inspiration. The what should come after the why. So I was always looking for what's the purpose. And I found, there's two kinds of people who question and people who just go along. Or we have a joke in America, the ones who do everything and the ones who watch everyone else do everything. But this is a little different. This is the people who are doing everything, but the other is asking, why are you doing this? It doesn't, like you're going very fast, but it looks like you're about to run off the cliff. Why are you going so fast towards the cliff? So I always had that nature. A lot of young people in my generation were asking questions like that. And I think that's really important. I think a lot of us, if you ask why are you doing it, there's not even a conscious answer. Well, other than everyone's doing it, or that's what you're supposed to do, or this is what I was told to do. And I'm not saying that's always wrong, but when it is wrong, then we have to stand back and ask, okay, where is this leading me? So I was occupied with a couple. I was occupied with the why. I was occupied with what happens after I die. I wanted to understand that because that seemed part of the why question. Why am I here? What happens after I die? That would seem important to know, don't you think? Why am I here? I'm here to make a lot of money, become successful. Well, what about after 100 years? Where do you want to be? Oh, I'll just be dead and gone. I'll be nothing. So that didn't make sense to me. And the third thing that preoccupied me was just the concept of happiness. And I had this intuition that happiness was not really something you get by doing something or achieving something or arranging something external. I always had this sense that happiness is something that you get within you. I didn't know, it was just a really vague idea, but I just had this intuition that it exists within us, and there must be a way of connecting with it or bringing it out or reviving it. And because the happiness, the arranging situations or trying to find happiness outside, it didn't always end up in a good way. And it didn't always last. Even if it didn't end up bad, it didn't last. And there was also like, okay, I did that, but I want to do it again, or I want to do something else. There was a lack of satisfaction. So that was making me think that this isn't right. You die and you become nothing. You come here and you have to do many things to try to be happy, and it doesn't last. And you don't even know why you're here. So those three things are like kind of driving me crazy. And I wasn't getting any answers. I was in university. Nobody seemed to know. The philosophy professors admitted, I don't know. It could be anybody. Anybody could guess. Your guess is as good as any famous philosopher. So that led me to like the edge of the cliff. Like, where do I go from here? So I was very open for answers that I wasn't getting through my education or from the people I knew. So that drew me. Well, you know the saying, you must have heard this: when the disciple's ready, the guru shows up.
Yes.
So I was very ready for a teacher. And around that time, I was in a bookstore and I came across Bhagavad Gita. And it just was like flashing lights on the bookshelf. Did it read this book? You know, like the book kind of had legs and crawled off the shelf. You know, because there's lots of books in a bookstore, right? And that was the one that crawled off the shelf. So I was ready. And so the guru came in the form of Bhagavad Gita, which is a conversation between Krishna and Arjuna. So Krishna is both Arjuna's guru, and guru meaning teacher, but also Krishna is the supreme, the absolute. So I read that book and it answered all those three questions and a lot of questions that I didn't think of asking yet. So when I was reading it, I was feeling like I'm so fortunate to have these answers, because the average person doesn't have answers to these questions. I'm fortunate to ask the question, and the average person doesn't even ask the question. I'm fortunate to have this book. I felt like, you know, some grace had fallen from heaven. I felt this was like really special, really rare that I could find this. And then I began learning it from the devotees of Krishna, and I began chanting. And then slowly there was a transformation within. And yes, I did answer the question why I'm here and what happens after death. And I did find out how to be happy. And I want to say one more thing about happiness. It's my experience was really interesting. As I was saying, normally in the material sense, we become happy by doing something or achieving something. Doing something could just be eating or going to a movie. It could be going on vacation. It could be climbing a mountain, surfing a wave, skiing down a mountain. And so many things we can do. Or it can be things which give us sensual pleasure, like seeing beautiful things, or tasting, touching, and so forth. That's how generally we find happiness. It's like we make some arrangement. You know, I got the new desk and the new computer and the new speakers, and now I'm happy. You know, so we all know that that's like, yeah, we're happy, but it, you know, it wears out a bit. It gets, what do we say? It gets, you get used to it. It gets dry. Well, there's a saying, I can't remember. It becomes old fast. Yeah, that's the saying. It becomes, you know, it's new, becomes old fast. So when I began chanting, I was having a different experience. I was now feeling more happiness just chanting, and it didn't matter inside, outside, day, night, you know, who I was, how much money in the bank, what I achieved in my education, if I were known or not known, glorified, defamed, it didn't matter. And I was thinking, this is really weird, because there's no time in my life I ever really could find happiness without doing something, you know, go even just a walk on the beach with a friend. I had to do something, and now I was just chanting. Of course, you might say that's doing something, but nothing similar.
Mantra meditation, is it? Chanting.
Yeah. Hare Krishna. I was chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. I didn't really understand it, but I had been meditating before, but nothing was this powerful. And not only was I happy, I was feeling what I would label as ecstasy, just like happiness just exploding out of your body, you know, like energy. You want to jump, you know. I mean, I did have experience. We were from the hippie generation, so we took psychedelics. There was a kind of ecstasy in that, you know, drug-induced, temporary. So that was a very real spiritual experience, chanting, and very deep knowledge from the Bhagavad Gita. So that just put me on the path and said, okay, I think I found what I'm looking for, and it's working, and I'm getting what I want, and it keeps working, and it keeps getting better. And that's the other thing. Okay, it's happiness, which is not based on creating a situation, and it's getting better. It's not getting old fast. It keeps getting better. It's expanding, which is something I never experienced before. We always get used to things. This was like every time you do it, it's better than the last time. So obviously different, right? Different than material things. So that was I would say that was a real spiritual experience. It was like an inverted material experience. Things are getting better. The happiness is not over. It lasts, you know. So these were deep realizations, and the knowledge was removing the confusion. So did that answer your first question, or you want more?
Yes, what made you a person you are now? Because you're known as purposely dedicated to serve others and to help them succeed.
Yeah.
So all those experiences that you mentioned, spiritual, very enlightened spiritual experiences, helped you to go along the path and discover more and more and more. And especially your connection with your spiritual mentor, your spiritual teacher, Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, how that molded you, in which way made your way?
Probably molded me in every way. But I'll take the first question, which is a question about caring for other people, or we could say feeling their suffering, empathizing, sympathizing, and then wanting to do something about it. Which sometimes we could just say a soft-hearted person feels the suffering of others. And I, like all of us, have gone through difficulties in life and have suffered mentally or physically. And I don't like it. And it really bothers me to see other people suffer. It makes me very unhappy. I don't, and especially when they don't have to. And my spiritual master actually could not tolerate the suffering of other people. He dedicated his life to eliminating the cause of suffering, which is material consciousness, the very cause in the first place. What got us into this world was a certain consciousness, and that consciousness will cause us to take birth in this chain of karma again and again. So we get a physical body, which includes a mind, and we all know sometimes how difficult the mind is to deal with. We all know what physical pain is. We all know what emotional pain is. If you're getting older, you know what old age is like. It's, things slow down. You can't enjoy in the same way. So you have, and if you're older, you obviously have more experience of suffering, more loss, more disappointment, frustration of things you couldn't achieve. So when my spiritual master, what my spiritual master was teaching is that there are different levels of suffering, but there's a spiritual level of suffering, which is ultimately causing us to rotate in this wheel of karma again and again, life after life after life. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, you don't know, but usually it's a mix of both. And he had a solution to liberate us from that. He said, if we practice bhakti, you can get out of this wheel. Otherwise, you'll never get out, because everything you do creates karma. Even good karma. So you just say, I'm a good person. So you have good karma, which means your next life, it'll be good. So it doesn't mean as a good person you get out. It just means your next life is good. But it's not all good, because inadvertently we create bad karma. We walk on ants, we breathe germs. We get upset at somebody unnecessarily. We create bad karma. So it's just, we're going around. And so he's saying, by this spiritual process of bhakti, you can get off the Ferris wheel and enter the spiritual realm eternally. And that was that was kind of equivalent to somebody giving you pills and saying it cures cancer. This one cures it. You know, every incurable disease, you have a pill for it. You'd be pretty excited. You know, they're doing their research. No, you don't have to do your research. I have the pill here. So, you know, that's how we felt. And so we felt his heart was like we have something. Like I said, in university, we didn't learn it. Nobody comes out of the university self-realized, you know, enlightened. So you're just prepared for the workforce, basically. So his heart affected us. And he was very pure. Because he was very pure, in his association, we would reflect his light. And we found ourselves compassionately going out, making personal sacrifices in ways we'd never made before, because that was his heart. He was giving us his heart. And we just wanted to help people. And we were happy to make personal sacrifices. And I just want to say one other thing is, if you're too concerned about your own happiness, then how can you be concerned about the suffering of others? You know, if I'm worried about what I'm going to eat today, I'm afraid to give you my food, even though you're starving, because then what am I going to eat? When you're on a spiritual level, you don't think that way, because you're not worried. You're not worried about your happiness, because you already are happy. So you know, like we're all worried. How am I going to be happy? What am I going to do Friday night? When you're on the spiritual plane, you don't think that way because you're full of happiness. And so when you're full of happiness, you don't think, well, is helping others going to make me happy or not? You don't have to think that way anymore. What if I don't like it? It doesn't, you don't think that way because you're in a different place. So he endowed us with a process that enabled us to experience that happiness. And therefore, it was even that much easier to help people because we never felt like we're missing out. We're not, you know, we're missing the bliss. No, this service to others was just even more blissful. And
it's really wonderful.
Yeah.
Really.
So
thank you so much for explaining it such
well,
a way.
let me explain one other thing because it's inherent in your question. There's a Sanskrit word called kripa. The kripa means grace or mercy. I don't know what the Slovenian word is, but you know, it's
Milost.
So that means that it's like me giving you something that enables you to achieve whatever you want, but you don't deserve it. You didn't work for it. You just wanted it. I had it and you asked me, can I have it also? It would be something like, let's say I'm expert at playing violin, and by my mystic power, I bestow mercy on you. And all of a sudden, you play violin almost as well as I do, and you never took a lesson. So instead of the skill of playing violin, it's spiritual realization, it's spiritual power. So when you serve a spiritual master, he gives you that power. It's a present in reciprocation. So a lot of our journey on the spiritual path was being affected and molded by this gift that was coming to us because he was asking us to serve, and he was giving us the power to do the service. We needed spiritual strength. We needed to practice what we were teaching people. We needed to be self-controlled, disciplined. You know, we're chanting every day. You need self-discipline. We were rising early. We were taking vows not to engage in certain activities which go against spiritual principles. We needed power. And so we were getting that by his desire, by his wishes. This is the process. When you serve somebody greater, then ultimately it goes back to the Supreme and this mercy comes down. And you can do things and realize things that on your own would be impossible to do or realize. So that's what was happening.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you very much. And what many people find with you is that are very endearing is actually your expertise in building a bridge between human and spiritual.
Yeah, yeah.
Because many people, when they encounter spiritual path or want to, how to say, go along a spiritual path and take certain spiritual discipline, they find this gap between their humanity and their spirituality.
Yes.
And and you really you're expert in actually providing advices, providing techniques, spiritual technologies, how to understand this gap and how to not be too hard on yourself when
Yes,
trying
yes.
to reach certain spiritual goals. And would you like to say something how this
Yeah.
inspiration come
Yeah.
that you kind of took this as a major part of your work?
Yeah.
This
Well, it came from my own mistakes, as a lot of what I teach is, you know, if you take the wrong road and come back and then take the right road, then you'll tell people, don't take that road. So I think a lot of it was like that. When I began practicing in our ashram, the oldest person was, I think, 29, and he had been practicing maybe 2.5 years. The average was probably 20 and practicing less than a year. So what we thought, as, and this is quite common, not that people don't think this today, what we thought is, well, we've lived material life for, I joined the ashram at 19, so I've lived for 19 years. I was raised in a fairly wealthy family, and I was wealthy enough to have everything I wanted. And so I got to experience, I didn't experience any lack. So, you know, I had a car when I was 16 and, you know, did like every sport and traveled and had a lot of independence. So it kind of felt like, all right, you know, I've done that. And as I said, I found spiritual life. So I think, okay, now that I found spiritual life, we're just going to go 100 miles an hour in spiritual life, and there's not going to be any problem. And within a few years, we'll be enlightened, self-realized on top of the mountain.
Mhm.
And that's that. And so that was one misconception. It takes a lot longer to get that high. Another misconception we had was that we were practicing self-discipline. So we were making vows. When we took initiation, we made vows. If we weren't married, we wouldn't have sex. We wouldn't take drugs. We'd be vegetarian. We wouldn't gamble. We wouldn't engage in frivolous activity. You know, just kind of reorienting our lives so that everything was spiritual. And so when you do that, and you can do that if you have a spiritual practice, but it doesn't mean that internally you won't have the desire to do those things. So say, okay, I'm not going to take drugs, but I was taking drugs for psychedelic drugs, let's say. You know, I'm taking psychedelic drugs for so many years, and then I say I'm not going to do it. So it doesn't mean I wouldn't occasionally think about it or even want it sometimes. But you control that, right? So what we misunderstood is that sometimes we had certain feelings for material things. And we thought, well, if you're going to control yourself, you should repress those feelings. Because if you don't, they're going to drive you crazy, and then you're going to do those things. And so it kind of made us start to think like we didn't really have those feelings, because we kind of subconsciously were able to repress them so much or suppress them so much that we didn't even acknowledge to ourselves that we had those. And so what we found is like very young men took strict vows of renunciation. I will never marry. I will go my whole life as a celibate. And in the middle of their celibacy, they fall in love. And it was totally unexpected because they had suppressed that desire, because they thought if they allowed that to face that desire, it would cause them to fall, was actually the opposite. If they would have faced it and processed it, they could have worked through it, or they would have gotten married and had a spiritual relationship and purified the desire over time. So we saw this happening again and again and again and again. The third problem was we thought that every solution to every problem was just to go deeper into your meditation. So let's say you came to the spiritual path and you had all kinds of emotional difficulties due to problems in the past or past lives, traumas, bad parenting, or your parents got divorced, or one of them was an alcoholic, or you were sexually abused or verbally abused. So the idea was, well, just chant and you'll be blissful, like I said, and you will be. And the idea was that, well, that problem won't affect you. And there were even things in books like Bhagavad Gita that made us think that that was the way to do it. It was misunderstood. And so through my experience, my own experience, but I would say more from people who had very traumatic pasts, I was seeing how much the emotional is affecting the spiritual. You can't ignore it. If it's unhealed, it's like if your knee is broken, you can't ignore it. You have to repair it. If your heart is broken emotionally, you have to heal it. And so we would also neglect this and say, no, I will just chant it away. But sometimes you can, depending on what the situation. It's not always that you have to deal with it in other ways. So I started seeing that when it was very deep, it was more difficult to chant away. If it was, a lot of things become clear through chanting and the spiritual practice, but some things, they go really deep and it's affecting one's psychology. And it needs to be addressed. So we were really good at what's now known as spiritual bypassing, just like not acknowledging it or acknowledging and avoiding dealing with it, turning our back to it, locking it in the closet, not worrying about it. And then it comes out of the closet and strangles you one day. Yes. So these, I didn't understand these things when I was younger. It was just, I'm a very observant person. I can learn a lot I understand things well by watching. Somehow or other, I understand people's hearts and minds and situations. So that's how I learn. I just learn by looking, thinking about it, what's going on here, going to the teachings, trying to make sense of the teachings in relation to what I'm seeing. See, some people, they just read the teachings, and if the teachings don't line up with what they're seeing, they pretend that they're not seeing what they're seeing. Because, well, this doesn't make sense to me because the teaching says you just chant and all your problems go away. But I've seen people who've been chanting and they still have some problems. A lot of problems went away. So, it's like, oh, I don't understand that. They'll go away. I can't think about it because my mind will explode because it seems to contradict what I've learned. So they just, they don't deal with it. And I was always, wait a minute, the teachings say this, but I'm looking at this. Do I misunderstand the teachings? Am I not understanding what I'm seeing? I have to make sense of this. It would like drive me crazy because it would happen all the time. And people would come to me and say, the teaching says this, but I'm experiencing this, I'm seeing this. And it would be common. People would say this to me. So all those experiences. And then one more, I would say that philosophy is very theoretical. And you can float around in your head for 1,000,000 years and not really understand anything and think you understand everything. Well, you understand a concept, but you may not realize in your life, you're not living that concept. You're just understanding it, but you're not actually doing it. And you could have such cognitive dissonance that you don't even realize that what you think you understand, you're not even doing, mistreating others and so forth. So I saw that within myself a lot. I was the real guinea pig for that. I learned that through the forgiveness course, because when I first forgave, it was probably 30 years after I began the practice. And I thought, this is strange that I held on to resentment for 30 years, but I was doing all the other practices. So it was like, it made me think, well, what's going on here? Like, how many other things are you doing that are contrary to what the teachings say, and you don't even realize it? So like you said, my teachings are practical. I realized that we have to take philosophy and put it into a practice. Like I took forgiveness and created like 30 steps. This is what you do. Because the philosophy in and of itself, unless you're very advanced, it's not going to, if you're very advanced, you just understand something. You go, okay, I understand it. Let's let it go. Not everybody can do that. You might have to go through steps. So I wanted to help people understand, like objectively, let's see where you're actually at, not what the teachings say where you should be at, and therefore you think you're there because it says you should be there, but let's actually see where you're actually at. And so I would ask difficult questions like, who are you trying to show off for? Did you ever lie? What were you afraid of? And who do you need to change? What are you trying to control that you can't control? All these kinds of questions that are contained in the philosophy, but they're never pointed at us to say, okay, now this will analyze where you're actually at in terms of the philosophy. So it's like, oh, I never looked at it that way. So I found that was very important. And so that's basically what I do in all my workshops is give people that kind of analysis, simple questions. Who are you trying to impress? Why are you trying to impress them? What's lacking in yourself that you need someone else's recognition? I never thought of that. Did you ever lie? Yeah. Why? What were you afraid of? Oh, I never realized what I was afraid of. If people had a video of your life and we showed it in a movie theater, what would people think you believe? Would they think you believe what you say you believe? And you realize, no, they wouldn't. So it's like I'm trying to help people realize you're chanting and doing the spiritual practice. Okay, that's part of your life. Let's look at the rest of your life. Does it line up? And so I felt that extremely important. And I don't just think for the path of bhakti, but I think for any spiritual path, there's always that danger that because you're doing certain rituals, it kind of makes you think you've been insulated from everything bad in the world, when in fact, as we know, religious people can do some very bad things. How could they do bad things and not have a conscience? Because they think their scripture is telling them to do that. They've misunderstood. So all these things were going on in my mind. And then so it evolved to the point where I felt like, okay, we've got lots of philosophy, but it has to be digested and people have to be able to apply it and be able to see if they're applying it. Was that too long an answer?
No, I'm just enjoying your explanation. And it's so highly appreciated by so many spiritualists, really. It's so valuable to have such persons who kind of help us to become more authentic, more real.
Yes.
In our approach to spirituality and developing our soul connection.
Yeah, I think it's also, like you also were saying in the introduction, I was saying I like to deal with what is real. Like, I have a problem, you have a problem, and Ananta Vijay has a problem. It's the same problem. And we're all afraid to admit it because we're afraid, well, if you find out I have this problem, you won't like me. But later we realize we all have the same problem because we're all human and we're trying to achieve something superhuman, divine, and everyone on the path has the same challenges. And so it's really important. Otherwise, you can denigrate yourself, beat yourself up because you think there's something wrong with you. Not at all. And being real is part of being humble, and part of being humble is essential for spiritual practice. And the more you advance, the more real you become, because you want to be real before your creator. And, if other people don't appreciate you because you have a fault, it's probably not the people you want to be your friends anymore. So in that sense, it's kind of good. to let people know your challenges. I mean, it's therapeutic, of course, but then you get to see who your friends are.
Mm. Yes, exactly. Thank you so much. Another question: why having spiritual take on life and having spiritual experiences is more important now than probably more than ever before? Why having spiritual take on life and having actually real spiritual experiences, not that only having, as you say, approach to philosophy and connection with philosophy, but real having a real, for example, now one of our teachers in Hare Krishna movement, Sachinandana Swami, he's also famous for his meditation retreats, japa meditation retreats, mantra meditation retreats. But now the title of his retreats are experiential or something like that. I'm not remembering properly now the word, but
experience, healing, therapeutic,
or experiential meditation retreats. So the very title carries this experience in itself, like you're here to make an experience, which is something that actually transforms you, not just listening or having this only intellectual approach to or mental approach to things.
Because religious life can be ritualistic without experience and not only experience, but transformation of the heart.
Yes.
And by transformation of the heart, I mean, like we're talking about humility and compassion. These things are developing because as spiritual beings, we have divine qualities. Like divine qualities means the qualities that God has, we have, maybe not all of them and not as fully, but the big ones, we have them. And if we are not evolving spiritually, those qualities will either not manifest or they won't manifest very much. And you're asking, like, why is it important now? I think anyone my age knows why, because they've seen what's happened to the world. You know, I'm 71, so, you know, let's say from the time I was a teenager where I could start thinking about what's going on in the world, we're looking at like 57 years of just watching the world. You know, I was right there in the heart of the hippie movement. So that was like a huge change in the world, most dramatic change I have ever seen, even more dramatic than 9/11, because the whole generation of Americans changed. And that has affected young people even to today. All this interest in, if you want to have some fun, watch some documentaries on the hippie movement, and you'll see them chanting Om, you'll see them doing yoga, you'll see them chanting Hare Krishna, like it all began there. Like 1964, it didn't happen. 65, 66, it started happening. And so I've seen so many changes. And if you look at the music of that generation, the 60s, what are they saying? They're addressing world situations, philosophical questions, We're Dust in the Wind, and George Harrison, All Things Must Pass. And so many bands. It was, you know, Vietnam War. And what does the music say now? Baby, let's go to bed tonight, basically, right? So the world has gone, you know, from that generation of asking questions, philosophical, it's gone down a lot. Fortunately, there's a whole other generation of people who are looking into yoga philosophy and, you know, kind of like where I was at. But the world is on the other side is, you know, I mean, you know, right now the war is going on in Ukraine. So, you know, what really, what more do we have to say? This is the first real war and potential world war since World War II. So we see what we've done to the planet. We see when I was young, you would work 9 to 5, one person in the family, and you live a nice life. The mother didn't have to work. The father could work in a factory and own a car and a house, or 2 cars in a house. What's going on now? What's all the issues about? The wealth gap, right? That's big talk, big talk. So stress, coping, what happened with COVID? People like had to live with themselves. That they never had to live with themselves before. They're realizing I don't even like myself that much. A lot of people, or they're realizing I don't even like my spouse that much. I've never been around him or her that much. I don't even like my kids that much. They're driving me crazy. I only see them a few hours a day. Now I'm home with them all day. These things are kind of in the forefront, especially, and then you end up it's costs so much to live, so you end up working a job you don't like. And there's pressure on the company. It's competitive. They're putting pressure on you. There's pressure on your boss. And social pressure, to be beautiful, to be famous, it's crazy, with social media, how many likes and this and that. And all the things you can do, with filters to make yourself look beautiful, more beautiful, and be concerned about it. So it's kind of like if you don't know how to go internal, and you're gonna have a hard time dealing with the external, unless you just want to be oblivious. Bliss, ignorance is bliss. Just get drunk on the weekends, pretend everything's fine. You can do that also. It doesn't work. Never did, never will. But a lot of people take that route. Just pretend. It's not a problem. But I think thinking people, they're looking for alternatives, alternative lifestyles, alternative answers. And as things get worse, the need for that is stronger, for sure. I mean, look at, like the food we're eating. I don't know in your country, but in our country, there's a huge industry of vitamins and supplements. Like, why do you need vitamins and supplements if you're eating a balanced diet? Because you can't eat a balanced diet unless you're growing it yourself, because the food doesn't have sufficient nutrients. Even the organic food, it's not ideal. But to speak of commercial food, it's like eating almost nothing. So, we've come to this point. It's one of the weirdest things. If you think about it, it's one of the weirdest things. We've come to a point where our food cannot provide the nutrition we need because of artificial ways of cultivating food, industrialized food, that we have to take supplements to get the nutrition that the food should have given. I mean, just that is insane.
Yes.
And so, so if you look at that and say, well, I'm living in a city squashed up with millions of other people in a little apartment, getting up to go to a job I don't like, to make money, to buy things that aren't even going to make me happy, or to buy things to show off to people that I don't even care about. It doesn't make any sense. And so if you don't find something internal, you're gonna drink your way to bliss. I don't know, or kill yourself or stress yourself out, or, what are the alternatives? Or, just become addicted to a sport or a hobby, to forget about it. That's okay, but it's not the ultimate solution.
Okay. How to increase our faith in challenging times like these we live in at the present? How to increase our faith in good, in humanity, in God, in His presence, His protection in challenging times. I'm from Bosnia, I'm not from Slovenia. I live in Bosnia. And for 4 years, we were enduring the really horrible war. And now these events really remind me of these experiences that I went through. And it's kind of, people are trying to really think about these subject matters, especially, the importance of faith in challenging times. So if you have some advice on that.
I could give some advice, a little philosophical, and it could sound a little insensitive. It's when there's disasters like this, it's easy to lose faith in a God, in a divine being, because naturally you think, well, if He's all powerful, why is He letting this happen? And for better, for worse, the way He designed this world is to let us make the world a great place or a mess. He's given us that freedom. So, some people say, well, maybe he shouldn't have given us the freedom, but if we're not free, we're not living beings. We're rocks. We're pieces of wood. Or living things have freedom by nature. Even the insect, you put your finger in front of it, it'll walk around. So he's given us freedom. And so we have to understand that. We have to understand how karma works. Otherwise, it can cast doubt on God. So, I think everyone believes in justice. Nobody, would think it would be a good idea if Hitler got off with murder, literally, of millions of people, and there was no repercussions for it. It's just, someone's a murderer, someone steals something from you. It's people think, okay, it's just that they're punished, that protects other people from them, and that in theory will rectify them, although it doesn't always. It depends how you punish them and so forth. But that's the idea, that it would rectify the situation. So everybody, I don't think anybody would want to live in a world that was unjust. Like we just pick, from straws. You're going to Harvard, and you're going to the worst university, worst college we can find, and you're the best student, and the other person isn't. That kind of world does not make sense. That's not the world. It's not the way the world was created. So karma is that instrument which mets out justice by its nature. It's a cosmic. There's a cosmic record of what we've all done, and not only what we've done, but why we've done it. Because sometimes you do something wrong, but there's a good reason. So you don't get karma in the way if you do something wrong for the wrong reason. Do something right for the wrong reason, there's negative karma. Do something wrong for the right reason, there can be good karma. So there's a universal record keeping of everything we're doing, plus also why we're doing it. And when we start breaking the laws of nature, there's reactions. And war is one of those reactions. And then people suffer. Now, here's the hard part. Karma is contagious in the sense that, like, I am a spiritual master and I have disciples. I become responsible for them. So if they do something that's karmically bad, I suffer. It comes to me. Same with parents and children. Same with leaders and citizens. The leaders are meant to guide citizens. So if the citizens are not guided properly, the leader gets the karma, some of it, not all of it. The teacher gets the karma. So karma is also transferred. So we often suffer because of mistakes of leaders. That's obvious. That's, every war is a mistake of somebody. And most citizens, obviously, most people don't want war. So the best way to look at and keep faith is to understand, okay, these are karmic consequences, and start asking why. Why are these things happening? What can we learn from them? Because if we don't learn, we continue to commit them. Like, when COVID started, and it was getting, we thought, oh, it'll be over in 3 weeks. And it was getting worse and worse and spreading. People who understand karma started thinking, yeah, there have been a lot of animals slaughtered for food. There's been a lot of people slaughtered in countries under dictatorships and so forth. The earth is being polluted with chemical fertilizers and so forth. There's a lot of lying going on in politics. So people understand karma and say, oh, I guess the karma is finally hitting. People are suffering. The whole world's come to a halt. They understand that, and they don't blame God. They say, okay, we as a human society are creating this problem, and not even all of us, just some. We understand that with the way the earth is being treated now and all the ecological problems. So a spiritually minded person does not lose faith in God, but tries to understand what people are doing wrong, why we're getting this reaction. It's all meant to be to be lessons. You know, like some people have no sense of touch. Their finger could be in fire. And if they just put their hand on the burner and they didn't see it was on fire, they would burn their whole hand. So karma hurts. And when it hurts, we're supposed to think, get my hand off that fire. And sometimes we can't understand something's bad unless it hurts us. And so karma is meant to move us in the right direction. And when we get off, like, on the road, you have those little bumps, you get up, you have those in your country. You're getting off the side of the road, at least in America. Yeah. And so you could be sleeping and it like wakes you up. I was falling asleep. So karma is like that. It's meant to, okay, here's a reaction. Let's look and see what's going on. Now, my spiritual master said war is a reaction to many things, one of which is animal slaughter. It's also obviously a reaction to poor leadership. And sometimes the karmic reactions are quite obvious. You can just put the dots together and see. And I can tell you the way I personally feel. I personally feel that when there are problems in the world, my spiritual consciousness or spiritual heart or spiritual status needs to strengthen. Because if more people elevate their consciousness, it purifies the world. If more people are chanting, it purifies the world. I've been chanting a lot since the war started, and I'm feeling like, let me chant to purify. If I can purify the world, maybe it'll change the minds and hearts. Who knows? We just did a ceremony today for the people of Ukraine with mantras of protection. So that's where we should go when we see these things, rather than lose faith. We think these things are happening because of the dirt in the hearts of certain people, of certain leaders, of the sins of a lot of the sins are committed by people innocent. They don't know killing animals is bad. They were never told. So we pray, we elevate our consciousness. As our consciousness elevates, there's more light going out to the world. As we chant mantras, there's more going out. It can shift. That's how I see it. Like what can you do? You're going to walk up to Putin and say, hey, quit this nonsense. We're not going to do that. But we can chant. We can elevate ourselves. We can pray and send those vibrations. It says sound travels around the world 7 times. Did you know that? Mm-hmm. So if I say Hare Krishna, it goes Hare Krishna. Takes a trip 7 times around.
7 times. Wow. Wonderful.
So if everybody's chanting, then the sound's going around, and that sound is very powerful, purifying. That my spiritual master said, this is a small percentage, like 1%. 1% are chanting, it would make it tip, so that the negative would go down, the positive would go up. So rather than lose faith, rather we should see it's a karmic reaction, and we need more faith to balance the negativity. If we lose faith, then it's going to get worse.
So to see this as an opportunity to increase our faith, actually.
Yeah. And see where the world's going if we don't spiritualize it. Because, like war is always a threat. Nuclear war is always a threat. Economic disasters are always threats. What are we going to do? No fuel anymore. You've got no food in your city. How many days can you live if no food comes in? A week, maybe, maximum. Now what do? There's nothing to eat. Nobody's growing food in your city. Unless you're growing your own food, unless you live on some land or you have a roof and it's full of food. We live in a very awkward situation. No society up to maybe 100 years ago, 100 years or so, lived this way. No society put themselves. We have, now there's a cyber war. We can completely destroy the infrastructure of a country because it's dependent on computers. And if we mess with your computer, then your power system's down, your water system's down, your fuel system's down, your airports are down. It's like, this is insane. This is completely so. If we don't become more spiritually evolved and live more natural lives, if we just buy into this and contribute to it, buying things we don't need, living in artificial ways, worried about what people think, if I don't have a Gucci label on my purse, then the world's just going to continue the way it's continuing. So the people who are doing spiritual practice actually have to do it in their life, not just, an hour a day or whatever. Mm-hmm. So that's how I would personally take these things. Like, who's going to change the world? It's not going to be militarily. Ultimately, it's a revolution of consciousness, of people changing their hearts, changing their lifestyles. We could drop the whole economy. If we all became spiritualized, the economy would fail. Nobody who knows anything about economics wants people to evolve spiritually, because then what do? We start riding bikes. We don't need fuel. We buy electric cars. We grow our own food. We stop smoking, drinking, eating meat. All the big industries just crash. The economy is on its knees. So we have built up an economy that's dependent on us not being spiritually evolved. And so all the propaganda is, you can enjoy this, you can have this, do this, go this, accumulate. And we don't even believe it, but it's coming in and it gets in subconsciously. That's the problem. We have to be aware of that, because we're all getting programmed. All of us, even the ones who understand this is wrong, we're getting programmed.
Oh yes, exactly.
For sure.
Thank you so much for your time and for your words of wisdom, pearls of wisdom. As some of our friends, they created a website with this title, "Words of Pearls of Wisdom," in Slovenian and also Serbo-Croatian or Bosnian language, with your quotes. So now it's since I think a month ago or something like that, it's commenced. And I also highly recommend to our audience your website. It's mahatmadas.com or something. Is it like that?
Mahatmadas.com. But
yes,
the
exactly.
Pearls of Wisdom is in Slovenian.
Slovenian, right? Yes. But this one is your own official website. Yeah. Which contains tons of material, literally. So many seminars, workshops, media, articles, links. It's really a huge wealth of spiritual wisdom. So I highly recommend to all that are watching. And do you have maybe some final words to conclude? For example, what's your greatest inspiration in life? What is something that you draw your day-to-day inspiration for day-to-day life?
Thank you for the question. My inspiration is basically drawn from 3 or 4 things. From my chanting, that's something I do very early in the morning, first thing. That transforms my consciousness more than anything. Not just chanting, but chanting deeply, going into deep prayer, deep connection with who I am, who is God. That connection, going there, it is like oxygen, spiritual oxygen. And I've been doing it 52 years. I can't imagine not doing it, just like nobody could imagine not eating or not sleeping or not drinking water or not breathing. It's like that fundamental. We're physical beings, we're emotional, mental beings, and we're spiritual beings. And most people give nutrition to the physical and some to the mental, and not many to the spiritual. And the spiritual is the most important. And we give most energy to the physical. The physical is not going to remain. The spiritual is eternal. So whatever you give to yourself spiritually, it remains eternally. So that, and also studying spiritual literature. So what I find by studying spiritual literature, it gives me clarity of thought. It enables me to see through, because seeing is not done with your eyes, it's done with your consciousness. Because it's your consciousness that sees reality. And when you have spiritual knowledge, then you get to see reality through the eyes of that knowledge. And it's very important, because the world is if we're in material consciousness, we don't see things as they are. And then that impels us into material activities and impels us to believe things will make us happy that won't. that never have made anybody happy. But our intelligence becomes clouded. So spiritual wisdom, it's very important. It clears the mind. Associating with spiritually minded people, super powerful, because we become like the people we associate with. Whether you believe it or not, or like it or not, is a fact. You hang out with thieves, someday you'll become a thief. You hang out with alcoholics, someday you'll become an alcoholic. It's just the way it is. If you're going to associate a lot with certain people, you become that way. You associate a lot with wealthy people, you'll actually become more wealthy. Associate with intellectuals, you'll start to become more intellectual. So associating with spiritually minded people. And the last thing is sharing. Because sharing is, like we say, yoga in action. This is, taking ideas and then, okay, let's give this. Other people are looking for it. They want it. They need it. And that enriches us when we give. And so as you give, you get. And I get so much insight from teaching. I teach so many things that while I'm teaching them, I write them down because it just came to me. I go, that's a good idea. Nobody would know if I didn't write it down. I go, that's a good idea. Nobody would know that it just came to me. But so many things come in the process of trying to understand it as a teacher. So that's what moves my life, and also music, chanting music, and writing music, performing, and really helping other people on the path is ultimately the most satisfying.
What a beautiful life. Thank you so much for sharing your beautiful life with us and the wealth of your experience and your wisdom with all of us. I'm so grateful that I had this opportunity. It's a great honor for me actually to be able to speak with you and to share your contribution to our audience. So thank you for your time, for taking out your time, and I hope to see you in Slovenia soon.
Yeah, maybe by the fall. I plan to be in Europe in September, early September.
That's wonderful.
Not far from you, in Poland. If everything is, if the world is still, if there's not too much disturbance in the world, that was the tentative plan. So not far away.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you to all the people that are watching this. Thank you for your time, for taking your time to listen to Mahatma Das Prabhu. And I wish you all the best. Have a good rest of the evening or good rest of the day, and all the best. Good evening. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.